We all know people who aren't great in a crisis, right? They lose their cool at the first sign of trouble, or they become paralyzed when things start to get scary. That's human nature. That's instinct. Fight, flight, freeze. When it comes to our leaders, however, we want them to stay cool-headed in a crisis while keeping the rest of us calm. They need to be able to reassure us and hold us together while getting us through it in one piece. Those who purport to be our leaders should actually lead all of us during our worst moments. This is, or at least it should be, a prerequisite for leadership. And this is important. I want to talk about just how vital it is that we have leaders we can look to and count on and trust when we're facing the kind of crisis that's currently unfolding in California. On Tuesday, as you know, fires broke out in several areas across Los Angeles County. In many parts, they continue to rage out of control. The Los Angeles Times reported that as of yesterday, 5 people have lost their lives, more than 10,000 structures have burned, and at least 130,000 Californians are under evacuation orders. Meteorologists say that the blaze in Pacific Palisades, the worst of them, will have to burn to the ocean. Due to the combination of fierce winds and excessively dry conditions, firefighters will not be able to stop the Palisades fire without the assistance of the Pacific Ocean. Los Angeles Fire Chief Kristen Crowley stated Thursday morning, quote, "We are absolutely not out of danger yet," unquote. Unfortunately for us, 2 of the people who have been most vocal during this ongoing tragedy, Donald Trump and Elon Musk, are terrible in a crisis. And by that, I don't mean that they don't handle crises well, although this is undoubtedly true. I mean they use crisis situations to make things worse on purpose. While a significant portion of our most populous state is literally on fire, conspiracists and purveyors of disinformation on the far right, and let's be honest, it's always on the right, are politicizing the tragedy with the significant assist of Donald and Elon Musk. Instead of rallying support and taking action to aid their fellow citizens, Donald and Musk are using their considerable reach to attack their perceived political enemies, to stoke division, and to spread conspiracy theories. Wired magazine reported that Donald and Musk and others on the right are blaming the destructive wildfires on DEI, which stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is as offensive as it is absurd. In response to a video of Chief Crowley's discussion of the DEI policies employed by the Los Angeles Fire Department, Elon tweeted the following: "DEI means people die." He's so clever. And that's simply because the police chief is a gay woman, and Musk automatically assumes that she must be responsible for the devastation out there, because how could she possibly be competent enough to lead the effort to put out these fires? She's not a straight white man. Here's another post from Musk in which he incorrectly blames both regulations and California politicians for the out-of-control wildfires. Quote, "The immense loss of homes in LA is primarily due to, 1, nonsensical overregulation that prevented creating fire breaks and doing brush clearing, and 2, bad governance at the state and local levels that resulted in a shortage of water." Okay, none of that is true. And the overregulation he points to is based on a fictional document that Donald's going to talk about later. And we know that there's not a shortage of water. It was just difficult to access the water because of many, many different factors on the ground, including an unprecedented spike in need for water. Now, as bad as Musk has been, Donald has been even worse. The president-elect's initial comments on the tragedy in Los Angeles took the form of rage posting lies about Gavin Newsom on his social media platform. Quote, "One of the best and most beautiful parts of the United States of America is burning to the ground. It's ashes. And Gavin Newsom should resign. This is all his fault, exclamation point, etc., unquote." Unfortunately, Donald had more to say. So watch this clip.
Okay, so as we talk about the better angels and people helping people, we also know that there is a counterpoint to that. And sometimes it can be like this. You're seeing here on Truth Social, which is the social media platform of the president-elect Donald Trump. He is responding to all this by placing blame on the California governor, Gavin Newsom, for not signing a water restoration declaration. So he says this. Now the ultimate price is being paid. He says he will demand that this incompetent governor, and these are the words of President-elect Donald Trump, allow beautiful, clean, fresh water to flow into California. He is to blame for this.
Because of Donald's reckless lies, Governor Newsom's office took to Twitter to clarify that Donald's claims are, quote, pure fiction, unquote. Then the governor, who was trying to manage this unfathomable tragedy that is impacting the lives of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Californians, had to go on live TV to talk to Anderson Cooper in order to push back against Donald's egregious lies.
Discretion, but the president-elect chose to attack you, blame you for this.
One can't even respond to it. I mean, people are literally fleeing. People have lost their lives. Kids lost their schools. Families completely torn asunder. Churches burned down. This guy wanted to politicize it. I have a lot of thoughts, and I know what I want to say. I won't. I stood next to a president of the United States of America today, and I was proud to be with Joe Biden. And he had the backs of every single person in this community. He didn't play politics, didn't try to divide any of us.
First of all, I wish Governor Newsom would tell us what he really thinks. That would be refreshing. Secondly, look at that backdrop and consider how grotesque it is that Newsom had to divert any of his energy to push back against Donald's slander. It's even worse, of course, that Donald is going to be in charge of everything in 11 days. There's a lot more to talk about here, but before I continue, it'd be great if you could take a second actually, to like and share this video, subscribe to our channel, and click the bell so you get alerted every time new videos drop. If you're listening to the podcast, please follow us and give us a 5-star review. Okay, now one of the most frustrating things about all of this is that none of it is surprising. Donald is not an unknown quantity anymore. After 4 years of his disastrous administration, we're all too familiar with the sort of chaos Donald brings to an already terrible situation. He has a long, sordid history of making everything worse. So let's take a quick look at Donald's reactions to some of the most consequential disasters he faced during his first term. And that would be natural disasters, not the disasters of his own making. Unfortunately, there were plenty of them, so he had a lot of opportunities to demonstrate his unique combination of ignorance, cruelty, and indifference to human suffering. Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico in 2017. This was the first time that a lot of people got to see just how incapable Donald was in handling an emergency. And he also clearly demonstrated that he didn't know what he was talking about. But worse, he demonstrated for those who might not have been paying attention, his jaw-dropping lack of empathy. In 2019, there was another horrific wildfire in Paradise, California.
Take care of the floors, the floors of the forests, very important. You look at other countries where they do it differently, and it's a whole different story. I was with the president of Finland, and he said, we have a much different, we're a forest nation. He called it a forest nation. And they spend a lot of time on raking and cleaning and doing things, and they don't have any problem. And when it is, it's a very small problem.
In 2019, Hurricane Dorian was descending on the southeastern portion of the United States. And Donald tweeted that Dorian was heading toward Alabama. It was not. So the National Weather Service, whose job it is to inform the American people about weather-related emergencies, corrected him, tweeting, quote, Alabama will not see any impacts from Dorian, unquote. Oh, the audacity of the National Weather Service to hurt Donald's feelings like that. He didn't handle this well because he's absolutely incapable of admitting he's wrong. So in a fit of ego-driven stupidity, Donald took a Sharpie and altered a map of the hurricane's path to make sure that it included Alabama. And then, of course, there's COVID, which I'm sure we all remember. For the first time in modern history, the leader of the United States used a global crisis in the form of a pandemic to pit American states against each other and then to divide American citizens against each other. He politicized wearing a mask, the most basic and effective way to contain the spread of the virus, and then he refused to take the crisis seriously. Because of his inaction and his inability to course correct and his inability to give a shit about other human beings, hundreds of thousands of Americans died needlessly. Every day in January 2021, we lost more Americans than we had on September 11th, 2001. The COVID pandemic should have been an opportunity to unite the American people. Instead, it was one of the most divisive periods in our history, and those divisions have only worsened over time. In 2023, massive hurricanes hit North Carolina and Florida. Despite being out of power, Donald, as a presidential candidate, continued to have a massive impact on the public's perception of the disaster responses, and he negatively influenced the ways in which victims perceive the efforts of the Biden administration in general, and FEMA in particular, to help them. Makes perfect sense that we would want to put this guy in charge again. So what now? Well, we've seen the real world consequences of what happens when Donald is in charge during a crisis. In 2020, he actually refused fire aid to California, a state under his protection, as president at that time.
Trump administration has denied California's request for wildfire disaster relief. The state asked for a major presidential disaster declaration last month for several of the fires burning through central and southern California. That includes the Creek Fire. It would have helped to pay for damage in this historic fire season. Governor Newsom says fires have cost California $229 million just this year. The state now plans to appeal the rejection for financial aid.
So let's take a look at the playbook. Donald has withheld disaster aid from other states whose governors didn't pay him sufficient obeisance. He's diverted resources away from first responders. He's repeatedly failed communities in crisis, and he's often made recommendations based on misinformation or pseudoscience that make everything worse. He actually recommended detonating a nuclear warhead in the eye of a hurricane. So this is what we can expect because we've seen it time and time again. If you need help in a crisis, but you do not kiss Donald's ass sufficiently, he will not help you. He will use the crisis to perpetuate misinformation and conspiracy theories, which will lead to a greater loss of life. He will blame the victims. He will divide us against each other. That's what he does. Maybe one of the few things he's actually good at. Due to climate change, we know that natural disasters are occurring with greater frequency, and they are more intense and have more destructive power than they did in the past, especially hurricanes and wildfires. One of the reasons we're here is because there has been a drive, even by people who should know better, to bury the past. Well, we need to be prepared, and the best way to do that is to remember what we've already been through.
From his Florida resort, President Trump brushed off the chance of coronavirus making its way to the White House, even as the mayor of Washington confirmed the first case in the nation's capital.
No, I'm not concerned at all. No, I'm not. No, we've done a great job.
The president showed the same confidence on Twitter, claiming we have a perfectly coordinated and fine-tuned plan.
This president has created a culture of misinformation.
The administration says more than 1 million tests will be available this week after they were shipped out on Friday. The same day, Mr. Trump said this.
Anybody that needs a test gets a test. They're there.
The Associated Press reports another apparent attempt to downplay the outbreak came when the White House overruled health officials who wanted to recommend elderly Americans not fly on commercial airlines.
It isn't only worsening natural disasters we need to worry about, though. Bird flu is on the rise, and as of now, according to the Centers of Disease Control, there have been 66 confirmed human cases of H5N1 bird flu. The first confirmed death occurred this week in Louisiana. With Donald's nomination of Robert Kennedy to be head of the Department of Health and Human Services, this puts us at increasing risk because, as you may know, Kennedy is a notorious anti-vaxxer. He's already made statements undermining the bird flu vaccine. This guy is a fanatic. Check out this clip.
I think those vaccines we need to have, again, true double-blind, placebo-controlled trials on that. There's 25% of Americans who believe that they know somebody who was killed by a COVID vaccine. 52% of Americans believe that the vaccines are causing injuries, including death. 52%.
Look, I don't know what this guy gets out of spreading those kinds of lies, but suffice it to say, he's an environmental attorney. He's not an immunologist, he's not a doctor, he's not a virologist, he is not a scientist of any kind, and nobody should be listening to him about anything related to vaccines or diseases or human health. We do know what Donald gets out of stirring up chaos during times when we need unity. Division benefits him. It always has, even if, or maybe especially if, it's at the expense of the rest of us. Because when division wears us down, it leaves him unaltered, and I would actually suggest that it energizes him. Remember, it was during COVID that Donald found the most effective way to tear us apart. He politicized a disease that should have been our common enemy. It didn't matter to him that the result of his malicious actions and inactions during that absolutely terrifying 9-month period when we needed real leadership ended up killing hundreds of thousands of Americans. What was true then, what has always been true and will always be true, is that if Donald Trump can in any way profit from your death, he will facilitate it. And then he will ignore the fact that you died. So buckle up, everybody. And please take a second to like the videos, share them, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you'll be notified when new videos drop. If you're listening on podcast, please follow the show, give us a 5-star rating. Now, we know what's heading our way in 10 days. In some ways, it feels like it's already here. So let's stick together and don't let anybody tell you that the only way for you to survive a crisis is to do so at the expense of other people. Stay safe and be kind, and I'll see you soon.